Hi folks, I'm Andy Abbas with Data Agility Group. Now that we're complete with discussing the assessment phase, and I hope that was helpful to you, we'll be going into the design phase of it. The design phase is where you actually take the information that you've gotten during the assessment process and design your migration strategy. How are you going to actually perform the migration? The first thing you want to look at is the application grouping. We referenced that briefly in the assessment phase of it, but it's very critical, and I want to reiterate. Whenever you're doing a migration, your design should be around your applications. Now, the hardware itself obviously is very critical. So you may be virtualizing, you may be doing a physical to physical, you may be doing a physical to virtual, you may be doing a virtual to virtual. Regardless of what that is, that's still the foundation, but what runs on that environment are your applications. So you need to be able to group those applications so that when you're performing the migration, it is not risking your day-to-day operations and your application workload. Second is you want to develop a migration method. How are you going to migrate? If you're going from a physical to a physical, are you actually going to take the image of the server and deploy it on the new server? Or are you going to build a new server and only migrate the data? Or if you're doing a virtual to virtual, how are you going to do that? Are you going to do that over the wire? Are you going to do it where you capture it locally onto some swing storage and then replicate and then ship it to the target location and then replicate the deltas? Because a lot of these things have a very, very critical approach to what your requirements are going to be for your infrastructure. For example, if you're doing a swing approach, your bandwidth requirements are going to be a lot less than if you're doing a over-the-wire migration replication approach. Then you want to prepare a risk analysis. Now, there are different methodologies to do a transition. One is to shut down everything and move it. Obviously, there are risks inherent to that, right? One risk, for example, is the server doesn't come up on the target location, but you've got data on there that you need to get. Well, there are some things that we can do to even mitigate risks against that, which is to capture the data locally in the source data center before you shut it down. We call that the risk assessment or risk mitigation process. Second is you want to be able to assess what the impact is going to be on your applications. How much downtime can your application sustain? Do you have an application that is run 7/24? Healthcare is a critical area because healthcare obviously never sleeps. If you're a hospital that's migrating your environment, how are you going to mitigate against risks? What kind of backups are you going to have available in the event that something goes wrong with your application? How much downtime can you sustain? What are some of the time frames that are least impacting to your environment? So a lot of those risk assessments will need to be done. And then you also develop a migration plan. What's going to happen during wave 1, wave 2, wave 3? What are some of the steps? Typically in a migration plan, you're going to document the tools that you're going to need. You're going to document what is the process flow. How are you going to actually migrate the data from your source environment to your target? Are you going to do a file level migration, or are you going to do a block level migration? A lot of these things come into play quite a bit when you're doing these migrations, because the design phase of it is what's going to dictate how well your migration is going to go. And oftentimes we have migrations where we may have multiple designs developed for different types of applications. Some applications can sustain a downtime, and we may do a forklift. We shut the server down, we ship it to the target, and we bring it back up. But obviously always making sure that we mitigate risk by capturing the data before we do that. Other migrations, we cannot afford any downtime. So we need to look at methodologies that we would migrate the data while the server is still, or the application is still in use. So all these things are definitely definite areas that you want to focus on when you're looking at, or when you're doing your design phase of the migration effort.